This is going to be an abnormal week for my channel. I typically only publish a video every Thursday afternoon, but this week I think is special and might be interesting to you, and maybe interesting if you've got some older teenagers. I'm going to share a daily video. Now I'm on the second day, it's Tuesday, and I'm teaching at the high school. I'm teaching financial literacy to seniors in high school. And I thought I would share this, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. Stay to the end. I'm sharing the full first 2 days, and I'm going to do every day this week a quick video on what I shared. And somebody had asked me to do this, and I think it's valuable. And I thought I would create this video. I know it's out of the ordinary, not just financial discussion for us adults, but maybe it'll be valuable. I've taught actually a lot of this material. I've sat down with adults that are in their 40s and 50s, and they've said they've never heard this material either. So stay with me. Look forward to you listening to the videos. I'd love to hear your comments. Please like and subscribe. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, I want to explain this video. It's a little bit out of topic from build to rent, but I was sharing with a group that I'm a part of. It's part of School, SKOOL, and it's the One Rental at a Time community. I was sharing with them in a Zoom call for accountability that we have every Sunday afternoon, and I was telling them that the school that my teenagers go to have asked me to teach financial literacy and investing. And so they asked me to be there for the entire week for the senior class. This is a small school. 2 periods that have economics. They've given me the entire week to teach them financial literacy. And I know if you're like me, you're thinking, man, I wished I would have had that in high school. So I thought I would share. I'm kind of a little behind, so the first 2 days, and then I'm going to create a video every day, both Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Today's Tuesday, and I want to share the first 2 days, kind of some of the topics, because I had another person message me and ask, would you please create a video on this? They might share it with their teenagers. I'm going to try to make this as concise as possible. It's 2 periods, so it's about an hour and a half worth of teaching, and I'm going to keep that somewhere in that 15 minutes or so of the first 2 days of class. But a couple of things, and I've got my notes here. Some of the first things we talked about is to get them to understand the difference between an asset and a liability. So, of course, I asked them the question, what is an asset and what is a liability? And they gave a lot of different things. And, of course, somebody said a house. And I had to explain to them, okay, if you had your house, does it cost you any money? And, of course, yeah, they said yes, when you have a mortgage. I said, well, what if you didn't have it with any loan on it? Does it cost you money? And, of course, eventually we got to that conclusion that, yes, a house costs you money with taxes, insurance, maintenance, utilities, all of those things. That is not necessarily an asset. And we went down to the conclusion that an asset was something that put money in your pocket, and a liability is what takes money out of your pocket. Then I started talking about what is the opposite of bad debt. Some of them have taken some classes by somebody you probably know that teaches a lot of material out there on the internet, and teaches into some of these schools. And I said, what is the opposite of bad debt? Of course, somebody said, well, it's no debt. And I said, no, the opposite of bad debt is good debt. And so I drew out on the whiteboard, I created this graphic of, okay, in big, bold letters, uppercase letters, burden, then I put a slash, and I put a tiny little wording saying benefit. That was bad debt. The other side of it, I said, creating huge letters, all caps, benefit, slash, tiny little words, burden. having good debt, or what we would call in the investment world having leverage, can be good debt. But I did share with them too much of a good thing might be bad. If you're over leveraged and have loans too high up to where the only business plan is it has to go perfect, or you lose the asset or you're in trouble, you're probably over leveraged even with what would be called good debt. So we talked about that, and I talked about the appropriate amount of equity you would have in the loan. And I said, like I always do, at minimum 25%, and I prefer 30%. The second thing I talked about was the two economies, and we see it here in life, and we've especially seen it over the last couple of years of this K-shaped economy, where the people that are succeeding were the asset owners, and the people that were struggling were the asset renters. With all this inflation that we've had over the last couple of years, the people that have gained the most are the asset owners. And then talked about the difference in the average net worth of somebody that owns a home and someone that stays a permanent renter. And rough number it was $396,000 for your homeowner and $11,000 for your home renter. And I said there are two different economies, and I want to teach you young adults to get into property ownership as fast as possible. Gen Zers are getting in it so late and so delayed in owning their first property. They're so behind many people. So I talked to them, and I'm going to share with them later in the week how they can get their first property much quicker. The other thing I talked to them about was work, and the principle of work to learn before you work to earn. Everybody, the younger they are, all they want to talk about is what are my hours, what are my benefits, what is my time off, and what is that communicating to somebody that you're interviewing, versus somebody that says, what is my opportunity? Who does it the best? Who can be teaching me? I want to learn it from the best. Your ultimate goal as a young adult is to work to learn. Get into mastery of every position that you're ever in, is learn from the very best and maybe even improve on that. That old apprentice model, which I think we've gotten away from as our country, is so needed for this younger group. They want to learn. They want to learn from the best. And I was encouraging them to their main priority at first is to work to learn. And then once you've mastered it, the earning will come. Then the final thing I talked about that day was the principle of teaching that typically only 10% pick up what you're teaching. And I challenged them. I said, I believe this group is better. I believe there's going to be more than 10% that learn from this and apply it to their lives. And the difference between knowledge and wisdom, you may have heard it and you know what the answer is, but wisdom is beginning to apply it and understanding the tiny little nuances of how to apply that knowledge. And then I asked them also questions they had. And it's been really neat to watch these teenagers warm up to the questions. Now, I know pretty much every one of these teenagers. It's a small school of, I think my daughter's senior class is only about 40 students. So I really know all of these kids, and I'm enjoying pouring into them. The reason I do this channel is not for money. The reason I'm doing this channel is to make an impact. And it's interesting to see with even these teenagers, I'm choosing to make an impact with them, and the school has asked me to begin doing this. They asked me in the fall. I taught for 2 days, and I guess I did good enough. They didn't kick me out. They asked me this spring to come back for an entire week. I'm hoping, and I've even asked them, I said, I think the ideal amount of time would be 2 weeks, and to really go dive very deep into these discussions, because each period's only about 45 minutes long. But they've asked a lot of questions. And so day 2, we went through all that discussion. Day 2, we went into a financial budget. What I shared for them was a good budget and a best practice budget. How you can be house poor and how you can be good. And so we started out with a typical good budget was housing was at 30%, but I said best practice was at 25% or less. With transportation at 15% was good. Best practice was keeping it close to 10% as possible. And we were going through all the different things: food, entertainment, utilities. Savings and giving were the top two. And I started with good is 10% to savings and 10% to giving. And I said best practice is to keep the giving at 10 and move savings to 20%, being at 25% for housing and 10% for transportation. But how to apply it, and I use the example of a $4,000 earnings. As I said, most of these kids, after they get out of college, probably their first job, they're in the upper 40s, maybe 50s, that your take home is going to be around, if it was $4,000 a month, it's going to be around $3,000 a month. And we set budgets on $3,000. I said at 30% for housing, that'd be $900. How are you going to do that? Because in our area, the typical 2-bedroom was around $1,500, and a 1-bedroom is going to run around $1,200. And I encourage them to get a friend initially to live with and split the cost to get that back down into the 25% range. The next thing we talked about, and this was a long discussion, we talked about how do the poor, middle class, and the financially independent wealthy people, what do they think the purpose of money is? And so I drew out, like a financial statement, the income and the expenses, and then the balance sheet, the assets and liabilities. And with the poor, they are living day to day. They don't think past the week. I talked about those that are financially independent think far out, decades to come, and then they change their behaviors because they're thinking 10, 20, 30 years out. The poor think just day to day, and all they spend their money on is consumables. Be it first taxes comes out first, and I show them that, I explain that. Then I show rent, entertainment, food, clothing. And unfortunately, we did talk about DoorDash. I see these renters and I see some of the employees. They finally get paid. What's the first thing they're doing? Now they're doing DoorDash. But at the end of their paycheck, they're saying their balance is zero or negative. And then as soon as they get paid, what are they doing? Spending money on DoorDash. And I talked to the kids about that. I talked to the kids about eating out. And then we talked about the envelope system. I think Dave Ramsey has some good material on that. I did it, my wife and I, early in our marriage. We were using the envelope system. I know that's pretty old school, but I said I would encourage you to use envelopes for eating out, for entertainment, for your gas, all those things, putting those in an envelope. Then we drew that out, and with them, with the poor and how their money comes in, it immediately goes out into consumables, that money goes. With middle class, unfortunately, they think as they earn more, they have the ability to borrow more. And what they do is they get a bigger house, nicer cars, they get maybe a boat, they get great credit cards, and they're using their credit cards. They are buying and using their income instead of taking more, and they're using their income grows. Unfortunately, they have lifestyle creep, and they let that lifestyle creep higher and higher to the edge of what they're making, and they still don't put much back. In their balance sheet, they have a little bit of asset because they have a house, and they maybe have a small retirement plan. But most of their money goes through their expenses and out to their loans that depreciate in value or don't put money back in your pocket and go out. Then we talked about the financially independent. Sorry, I've got somebody doing construction behind me. I know you're hearing the beeping, but I wanted to do this outside. It's so pretty, just enjoying the day. Financially independent, we talked about at minimum, the financially independent have 5 streams of income. And I went through a lot of them, from salary to rent to different things, from dividends, from maybe interest on something in the bank. I put all those things in there. And oh man, it's starting to just sprinkle a little bit. But what their income, their salary only represents 22% or less of their income for the financially independent. We talk about those things, and I show the graphic from their assets and liabilities. Their liabilities graphically are much smaller, but their assets column is huge, and the majority of their income comes from there, and their expenses for their lifestyle is much smaller. And there I said, poor, the money goes out. Middle class, the money goes out. For the financially independent, that money grows. So those are some of the things that I'm talking about with the class the first 2 days, and it's been really neat to see them ask questions. They wanted to know what that looks like. How do you build your credit? What does it affect? How does the scoring process work? They want to know more about credit. How do you get your first purchase of real estate? And I'm going to show them how to own their first property and not have to pay for their own housing, how to do house hacking. How do they do savings and not spend it? So I talked to them, we're talking a little bit about that, about setting up a separate account, not leaving that savings in their operating account. They also asked today the order and the action items. These teenagers are desperately hungry to learn. And they're excited because this is something practical and real life. They know how to translate it. And I was talking to the teacher. She says they're starting to get a little concerned. They see real life coming right at them in the windshield, and they are hungry and open to this discussion. So that's a lot of the first 2 days. And tomorrow I'll talk to you about day 3. But I thought I'd share that and record this while it's still fresh this afternoon. I teach this on the first 2 periods, so I'm having to get up early and go to school with my backpack. But what I want to do is share this, and for here at the Build to Rent channel, it's nailing financial freedom one build at a time. Till tomorrow. Talk to you later.